My name is Marcus Webb, and I need to tell you about the most extraordinary relationship of my life before the memory fades completely. I'm 78 years old now, suffering from advancing dementia that steals a little more of me each day. My doctors say I have maybe a year before I won't remember my own name, won't recognize my children, won't know who I am or what I've done, so I'm recording this while I still can, while the memories are still clear enough to trust, while I can still articulate what happened between 1987 and 2023, a span of 36 years during which I maintained a relationship with a being that science says doesn't exist, a being I saved from death in the spring of 1987, a being who returned year after year with gifts that progressed from simple tokens to something so profound I still don't fully understand it. And finally, 3 months ago, a being who gave me the most unexpected gift of all, something that changed everything I thought I knew about intelligence, about consciousness, about what it means to be a person. I'm telling this story now because my children think I'm already lost to dementia, think the being I talk about is a hallucination, think the gift he gave me is confusion or fantasy. But it's real. All of it is real. And I need someone to know the truth before I lose the ability to tell it. I was 42 years old in the spring of 1987. Vietnam veteran, medically retired after taking shrapnel in my left leg that left me with a permanent limp and chronic pain. I'd moved to a small property on the Olympic Peninsula, 15 acres of forest with a modest house, isolated enough that I could live with my PTSD without inflicting it on others. I'd spent the previous 12 years learning to be alone, learning to manage the nightmares, learning to find peace in solitude and nature. The VA had me on a cocktail of medications that barely worked, but the forest helped. The quiet, the distance from other humans, the routine of maintaining my property, chopping wood, fishing in the creek that ran through my land. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it was survival. And after Vietnam, survival felt like enough. The war had broken something in me that never properly healed. I'd seen friends die in my arms despite my best efforts as a medic, had made impossible decisions about who to treat first, who might survive, who was already gone. Those decisions haunted me. The faces of men I couldn't save visited me in dreams every night. The isolation of the Olympic Peninsula wasn't running away. It was the only way I could function. Cities overwhelmed me. Crowds triggered panic attacks. The constant noise of civilization made sleep impossible. But here, in the forest with nothing but trees and creek water and the occasional deer, I could breathe. Could exist without the constant vigilance that urban life required. Could lower my guard enough to rest. April 1987 was unusually cold. Late snow. I was checking my property line, something I did weekly to make sure no one was trespassing or dumping garbage, when I heard sounds that didn't belong. Not animal sounds, not human sounds. Something in between. Labored breathing, pained vocalizations, coming from a ravine about 200 yards from my house. Every instinct told me to ignore it. Mind your own business, Marcus. Don't get involved. Don't complicate your life. But I was a medic in Vietnam. Spent 2 years patching up soldiers, saving lives, watching men die when I couldn't save them. That instinct, the need to help when you hear suffering, doesn't go away just because you want it to. I found him at the bottom of the ravine. At first I thought it was a bear. The size was right. Massive, maybe 700 pounds, but the shape was wrong. Bipedal, arms too long, face that was neither human nor ape, but something distinct, and the injury was severe. His right side was shredded, deep lacerations that looked like he'd been caught in machinery or attacked by something with rotating blades, possibly a logging accident. The area had active timber operations, and if he'd gotten too close to equipment, the wounds were bad, very bad. He was bleeding out. Would die within hours without treatment. He saw me standing at the top of the ravine, made eye contact, and I saw intelligence there. Real, unmistakable intelligence. He wasn't just aware. He was conscious, self-aware, suffering in a way that required understanding of what was happening to him, and he made a choice. Instead of trying to flee or fight, he stayed still, watching me, waiting to see what I would do, giving me the opportunity to decide, help or walk away. I should have walked away, should have called someone, should have. I don't know. Done anything except what I did. But I looked at those intelligent eyes, at the suffering in them, at the blood pooling beneath him, and I made the same choice I'd made hundreds of times in Vietnam. I decided to help. "I'm coming down," I called out, not knowing if he understood words but hoping tone would communicate intention. "I'm a medic. I'm going to try to help you. Don't fight me. Please don't fight me." Getting down that ravine with my bad leg was agony. Getting back up with medical supplies was worse, but I made it. Approached him slowly, hands visible, movements telegraphed. He watched every step but didn't resist when I knelt beside him. Didn't fight when I started examining the wounds. Just lay there, breathing hard, occasionally making low sounds that might have been pain or might have been communication. The injuries were extensive. Deep lacerations across his torso, right arm nearly severed, massive blood loss. In a hospital with a full surgical team, he might have had a 50-50 chance. In a ravine with one medic and a basic field kit, I gave him maybe 20%. But 20% wasn't zero. So I worked. I spent 6 hours in that ravine, used every bit of medical knowledge I still retained from the war, applied pressure to stop bleeding, cleaned wounds with antiseptic, stitched what could be stitched, crude field sutures, not pretty but functional, bandaged everything with supplies I had to hike back to my house to get, gave him antibiotics, horse antibiotics from a vet supply store, calculated dosage based on estimated weight, hoped his system was compatible enough with mammalian biology that they'd work instead of poison him. He endured it all without fighting, without aggression. He'd whimper when I hit painful areas, would tense up when I was stitching, but he never tried to hurt me. Never lashed out despite having every reason to. He was choosing to trust me, choosing to let me help despite being vulnerable and probably terrified. When I finished, the sun was setting. He was still alive, still breathing. That was something. I hiked back to my house, exhausted, covered in blood, his and some of mine from reopened wounds in my leg, and collapsed. Didn't even make it to bed. Just fell asleep on the couch, too tired to move. I went back the next morning expecting to find a body, expecting that despite my efforts, the injuries had been too severe, the blood loss too extensive. But he was gone. The ravine was empty except for blood-stained earth and my discarded medical supplies. He'd survived the night, had been strong enough to leave, had climbed out of that ravine and disappeared into the forest. I thought that was the end. Thought I'd saved a life and would never know if it lasted. Thought it was just another moment of trying to do right in a world that often didn't reward the effort. I'd done what I could. That had to be enough. Just like in Vietnam. You save who you can save, you do your best, and then you let go because holding on to outcomes you can't control will destroy you. I cleaned up my medical supplies, washed the blood from my clothes, and went back to my routine. Back to solitude. Back to the quiet life I'd built. I was wrong. Because 3 months later, he came back, and he brought me a gift. July 1987. I was sitting on my porch in the evening, drinking coffee, watching the forest, something I did most nights. The quiet was therapeutic. The forest sounds, wind in trees, creek water, occasional animal calls, helped with the PTSD. Kept me grounded. Reminded me I was here, not there. Not in Vietnam. Not in the war. Here. Safe. I heard him before I saw him. Heavy footsteps, deliberate. Not trying to be silent, but not being unnecessarily loud either. Movement that suggested size and confidence. And then he stepped out of the tree line about 50 yards from my house. Into the clearing, into visibility. Making himself known. It was him. I knew it immediately. The same being I'd treated 3 months earlier. Bigger than I'd remembered. Standing fully upright now, he had to be 8 feet tall at least. But the scars confirmed it. I could see the healed lacerations across his right side, visible even through his fur. He'd survived, healed, recovered from injuries that should have killed him. We stared at each other for a long time, neither moving. neither threatening. Just acknowledging. Him acknowledging that he recognized me. Me acknowledging that I recognized him. And then he did something that stunned me. He reached into a crude pouch he wore, woven plant fibers, simple but clearly made with intention, and pulled something out. Held it up so I could see. Then placed it carefully on the ground, backed away, and disappeared into the forest. I waited 10 minutes before approaching, making sure he was gone, making sure this wasn't some kind of trap, though I had no idea what kind of trap it could be or why he'd set one. When I finally walked to where he'd been standing, I found his gift. A stone, river stone, smooth and white, about the size of a baseball, beautiful in its simplicity, but clearly chosen deliberately, placed deliberately, left for me deliberately. He was thanking me. An intelligent being was expressing gratitude for my help, using a gift the way humans do, acknowledging debt the way humans do, demonstrating culture the way humans do. I took the stone inside, put it on my mantle, studied it for hours that night, turned it over in my hands, feeling the smoothness, the weight, the perfection of its shape. This wasn't a random stone. This had been selected from probably hundreds of river stones, chosen for its beauty, its shape, its quality. Time and thought had gone into this selection. This was intentional gift-giving that required planning, aesthetic judgment, and understanding of symbolic gesture. This was proof, if I needed proof, that what I'd saved was a person, not an animal. A person capable of abstract thought and cultural expression. I wondered if I'd ever see him again. Wondered what it meant that I'd saved something intelligent enough to understand and express gratitude. Wondered if I should tell someone. But who? Who would believe me? And what would they do if they did believe? Hunt him? Study him? Capture him? No. Better to keep this quiet. Better to protect what I'd saved rather than expose it to a world that would destroy it. 1 year later, summer 1988, he returned. Same pattern. Evening. Stepped into the clearing. Made himself visible. This time he came closer, maybe 30 yards from the porch. Close enough that I could see his face clearly, see the intelligence in his eyes, see him watching me with clear recognition. He reached into his pouch again, pulled out another gift, placed it on the ground, made a sound, low, rumbling, complicated, not words but definitely communicative, then left. The second gift was a bird's nest, perfectly intact, woven intricately from grasses and small twigs. Empty, no eggs, no occupants, just the nest itself. A beautiful natural object that showed even more clear intention than the stone. He'd found something beautiful, something interesting, and he'd thought, I will give this to the human who saved me. This became a pattern. Every year he'd return. Always summer, always evening. Always the same approach. Step into clearing. Make himself visible. Come close enough to leave a gift. Make that rumbling sound. Leave. And every year the gifts became more complex, more personal, more meaningful. Year 3. A collection of medicinal plants. Roots and leaves I recognized as having healing properties. He was giving me medicine, acknowledging that I was a healer, showing me that he understood what I'd done in terms of my role or identity. Year 4. A carved piece of wood. Not sophisticated carving, no fine details or realistic imagery, but definitely intentional. Geometric patterns cut into a branch. Proof of tool use. Proof of artistic expression. Proof of culture. Year 5. Animal teeth arranged on a strip of bark. Decorative. Purposeless except as art or communication. He was sharing his culture with me, showing me objects that had meaning in his world. The gifts continued, year after year, and I began to understand. This wasn't just gratitude anymore. This was relationship. This was a being choosing to maintain connection with me, choosing to visit annually, choosing to share pieces of his life and culture. We couldn't speak to each other, couldn't have conversations in any traditional sense. But we were communicating, he with his gifts and his presence, Me with my acceptance and my careful preservation of everything he gave me. I started documenting each visit in a journal, recorded the date, the gift, observations about his appearance and behavior. Not scientific documentation. I wasn't trying to prove anything or study him. This was personal record-keeping, memories I wanted to preserve, a relationship I wanted to honor by paying attention to details, by remembering, by treating each annual visit as the significant event it was. I never tried to follow him, never tried to find where he lived or if he had family, never tried to document him or prove his existence. That felt like violation, like betraying the trust implicit in his visits. He was choosing to reveal himself to me on his terms, choosing how much contact we had, choosing what he shared. My role was to receive those gifts with gratitude and respect, to honor his autonomy and his choices about how our relationship functioned. By year 10, 1997, I had a collection of gifts on my mantle: stones, nests, carved wood, teeth, feathers, plants, bones arranged in patterns. Once a piece of mica that caught light beautifully. Each one chosen deliberately, each one meaningful, each one part of a decades-long conversation between species about gratitude, friendship, and the possibility of connection across the boundaries we think separate us. I thought I understood what this was, thought I understood the relationship, thought I knew what his annual visits meant. But I was wrong, because in year 36 he brought a gift I never expected, a gift that changed everything. And that gift is why I'm recording this now, while I still can, before dementia takes even this memory from me. The years passed, the gifts continued, but something else developed too, a deeper understanding, a refinement of our communication. By year 15, 2002, I had learned to read his body language, could tell his moods from his posture, could understand when he was pleased or troubled or simply present. And he had learned to read me too. Could tell when my leg pain was bad. Those days he'd leave medicinal plants specifically for pain relief. Could tell when my PTSD was worse. Those visits he'd stay visible longer, as if his presence itself was meant to be calming. We were learning each other across the species divide. I started leaving gifts for him too. At first just food, apples, which I learned he loved, dried meat, nuts, then other things. Tools I thought might be useful. A knife with a leather handle he could grip, a tarp he could use for shelter. Books, even though I didn't know if he could understand images. He'd accept some gifts, leave others. The pattern told me things. He took practical items, left decorative ones. His culture valued function over form, apparently. Or maybe he simply had no use for human aesthetics. The exchange of gifts became ritualized over time. I'd place my offerings on a flat rock at the edge of my property a week before he usually visited. He'd take what he wanted, leave what he didn't. Then, on his visit, he'd bring his gift. This established a rhythm, a predictable pattern that both of us could rely on. Predictability built trust. Trust deepened relationship. By year 12, we'd developed a language of gesture and timing that allowed us to communicate basic concepts without words. The closest we ever came to actual contact was year 20, 2007. He approached to within 10 feet of my porch, closer than ever before. Close enough that I could hear his breathing, could see details in his face, could smell the forest scent that clung to him. He was old by then. I could see gray in his fur, could see him moving more carefully, favoring his right side where the old injuries had been. We were aging together, this being and I. Both of us slower than we'd been. Both of us carrying scars from long ago traumas. He sat down on the ground, just sat, 10 feet from where I sat on my porch, and we stayed like that for maybe 20 minutes. Not doing anything, not communicating in any obvious way, just being together, sharing space, sharing time, sharing the evening quiet and the forest sounds and the simple fact of existence. That was the visit where I cried. Couldn't help it. Couldn't stop the tears that came from someplace deeper than words, because I realized this being had been visiting me for 20 years, 2 decades, had made the journey to my property every single summer, had never missed a year, had maintained this connection across 2 decades despite having every reason to avoid all humans. And he did it because I'd saved his life once. Because I'd chosen to help when I could have walked away. Because one act of compassion had created a bond that lasted longer than most human friendships. He made a sound when I started crying. That low, rumbling vocalization. But softer this time. Gentler. He understood I was emotional. Understood it wasn't bad emotion. I was smiling through the tears. He stood carefully, approached even closer. And for the first and only time in 20 years he touched me. Extended one massive hand and placed it on my shoulder. Gentle, deliberate, a gesture of comfort that transcended species. His hand was warm, heavy, real, the touch of a friend offering consolation. Then he left. And I sat on that porch and cried for an hour, overwhelmed by the impossibility and beauty of what had just happened. My children visited sometimes, never in summer when he came. I'd learned to discourage summer visits, making excuses about allergies and preferences for solitude. They saw my collection of gifts on the mantel, asked about them. I told them I collected interesting natural objects from my walks in the forest. They thought it was a harmless old man hobby. Never suspected the truth. Never imagined their father was maintaining a decades-long relationship with Bigfoot. My daughter Sarah was the most persistent with questions. "Dad, some of these are really beautiful. Where do you find them?" I'd deflect. Talk about hiking, about knowing the good spots, about having decades to search. She'd smile and nod, humoring what she thought was an eccentric old veteran's pastime. If I told her the truth, that each object was a gift from an intelligent being I'd saved 30 years ago, she'd have me evaluated for dementia immediately. So I kept quiet, protected both him and myself through strategic omission. As I aged, as my health declined, his gifts became more targeted, more specific to what I needed. Year 25, 2012. He brought me a walking stick, perfectly sized for my height, carved smooth, strong and lightweight. He'd watched me struggle with my bad leg, had observed that I used a stick sometimes when hiking, had made one specifically for me. Not found, made. The tool marks were visible. He'd spent time crafting this, time thinking about my needs, time creating something to help me. I used that walking stick every day for the next decade, used it until it was worn smooth from my hands, used it knowing that a being who supposedly didn't exist had made it specifically for me out of kindness and care and understanding of my needs. Year 30, 2017, he brought me plants I didn't recognize, roots and leaves with a strong medicinal smell. Placed them carefully on the ground with clear instruction in his gestures. "This is for you. This is medicine. Use this." I researched them later. Indigenous pain remedies, anti-inflammatory plants, natural compounds that actually worked better than some of my prescription medications. He was trying to help with my chronic pain, was sharing his people's medical knowledge, was acting as healer to the healer who'd saved him 30 years earlier. The relationship had evolved from gratitude to friendship to something deeper, something like family, like the bond between beings who'd chosen each other across impossible boundaries, who'd maintained connection despite all the reasons it shouldn't work, who'd built trust through decades of patient, consistent demonstration that the other was safe, was worth knowing, was deserving of care. I thought I knew what this relationship was, thought I understood its limits and its meanings, thought the greatest gift he'd given me was the relationship itself, the knowledge that intelligence existed in forms we didn't recognize, that connection was possible across species, that kindness could bridge gaps that seemed unbridgeable. But in year 36, 3 months ago, in the summer of 2023, he gave me something else, something I didn't expect and couldn't have anticipated, something that forced me to completely reconsider what I thought I knew about his species, about intelligence, about consciousness itself. He brought me a memory, and not just any memory, my memory, a memory I'd lost to dementia, a memory I thought was gone forever. And somehow, impossibly, inexplicably, He gave it back. Summer 2023. I was 78 years old. The dementia had been progressing for 2 years. I'd been diagnosed in 2021. Early stage Alzheimer's, they said, would get worse, would eventually take everything. Already I was losing things. Recent memories mostly. Conversations I couldn't recall having. Items I'd misplaced and couldn't find. Names of people I'd known for years. The usual pattern. But also older memories starting to fade. Childhood experiences becoming fuzzy. Important moments losing detail. My past slowly erasing itself. The diagnosis had been devastating. Not the death sentence, I'd made peace with mortality long ago, but the prospect of losing myself before dying, of spending my final years not knowing who I was, what I'd done, who I'd loved, of my children visiting a father who didn't recognize them, of dying confused and lost inside a mind that no longer worked. That was the nightmare. That was worse than any death I could imagine. My children had started talking about care facilities, about me being unsafe living alone, about needing supervision. I'd been fighting them, insisting I was fine, insisting I could still manage my property, my life, my independence. But I knew they were right, knew I was declining, knew my time living independently was limited. Maybe one more year, maybe less. July arrived. Summer. The time when he usually visited. I sat on my porch every evening hoping, not sure if he'd come, not sure if he was even still alive. He'd been old too, had been aging along with me. Maybe last year had been the final visit. Maybe he'd died over the winter. Maybe this was the year the pattern would break. But he came. Evening of July 15th, stepped out of the forest into the clearing, and I saw immediately that something was different. He was carrying something, not in his usual pouch, carrying it carefully in both hands, something he was protecting, something that required care. He approached closer than usual, within 5 feet of the porch, close enough that I could see his face in detail, see how much he'd aged. His fur was more gray than brown now. His movements were stiff. His breathing labored just from the walk to my house. We were both old men now, both approaching the end, both carrying scars and pains and the weight of decades. He held out what he was carrying, a bundle wrapped in large leaves, tied with plant fibers. He made that rumbling sound, but different this time. Urgent, important. He was trying to communicate something specific, something that mattered. I stood carefully, approached, took the bundle from his hands. Our fingers touched. First time in years. His skin was rough, calloused, warm, human-like despite the fur and size. I untied the bundle carefully, opened the leaves. Inside was a collection of objects, small objects. Some I recognized, some I didn't. A bullet casing, a small photograph, weathered and faded, a military patch, dog tags, items from my past, items from Vietnam. Items I'd lost or discarded or thought were gone forever. But that wasn't the gift. The objects were just, I don't know, context, preparation. Because when I touched them, something happened. Something impossible. I remembered. Not just vague recollection. Complete, total, vivid memory. My first day in Vietnam, the helicopter landing, the smell of diesel and jungle and fear, the faces of my unit, names I'd forgotten, details I'd lost. It all came flooding back with a clarity I hadn't experienced in years, as if the dementia had never touched that memory, as if it had been preserved perfectly somewhere and was now being returned to me. The intensity of it shocked me. I could feel the heat of Vietnam, could hear the helicopter rotors, could see the face of my sergeant, Thompson. His name was Thompson, greeting us at the landing zone. Could smell the combination of jet fuel and tropical vegetation that defined that place. Every sensory detail, every emotion, every thought I'd had as a 20-year-old medic stepping into a war zone. All of it perfect, all of it preserved, all of it returned. I looked up at him, shocked. "What did you do? How did you?" He made another sound, reached out and touched his head, then touched my head, then made a gesture, hands together, then separating, then coming back together. He was trying to explain something about connection, something about memory, something about... I touched the next object. Another memory returned. Different memory. My wedding day. My wife, dead now for 5 years, smiling at me. The church, the vows, details I'd thought were lost. Returned complete and perfect. Object by object, I touched them. Object by object. Memories returned. My children being born. My father teaching me to fish. My grandfather's funeral. My first day of medic training. The day I got wounded in Vietnam. The day I came home. The day I bought this property. Memory after memory after memory returned in perfect clarity. Not just returned, restored. As if they'd been copied and saved, and were now being reinstalled into my failing brain. It took me an hour to go through all the objects. An hour of crying and laughing and experiencing my own life again. My own history. Things I thought dementia had stolen permanently. Things I'd mourned losing. All of it back. All of it clear. All of it saved. When I finished, when I'd touched every object and recovered every memory they contained, I looked at him. How? How is this possible? He couldn't answer. Couldn't explain in words I'd understand, but he touched his head again. Made that gesture, connection, separation, connection. And I understood. Or thought I understood. His species had abilities we didn't. Could store memories externally somehow. Could preserve them in objects. Could transfer them back. It was technology or biology or something beyond both that I couldn't comprehend. But it was real. The proof was in my head, in the memories I could now access perfectly again. You saved them, I said, my voice breaking, when you visited all those years. You were, what? Collecting my memories? Preserving them? Knowing I'd need them someday? He made an affirmative sound. That low rumble I'd learned meant yes. He'd been saving my memories for years. Decades, maybe. Collecting them somehow during his visits. Storing them. Preserving them against the day when my brain could no longer hold them. And now, when I needed them most, he was giving them back. Why? I asked. Why would you do this for me? He stepped forward, touched his chest, then touched my chest. The same gesture from 16 years ago. Connection, relationship, love maybe, in whatever form his species understood it. Then he touched the scar on his side. The place where I'd saved his life 36 years ago, and I understood completely. He was returning the favor. I'd saved his life once. Now he was saving mine. Not my physical life, that was ending regardless. But my life's memories, my history, my identity, everything that made me who I was. He was preserving that against the disease that would otherwise erase it. That night after he left, I sat with those objects and tested my restored memories, thought about specific moments from my past, found that I could now access them perfectly. Things that had been fuzzy or gone were sharp again. Recent memories were still problematic. The dementia was still progressing, still affecting my ability to form new memories. But the old ones, the important ones, the ones that defined who I was, those were back, preserved, protected, saved. I spent hours going through them, testing the restoration, remembering things I'd forgotten, my mother's voice, the smell of my childhood home, the taste of my grandmother's cooking, first kiss, first heartbreak, boot camp, Vietnam, coming home, meeting my wife, our first date, our wedding night, the birth of each child, every milestone, every significant moment, all preserved, all accessible, all mine again despite the disease that should have stolen them. I called my daughter the next morning. Sarah, I said, I need you to come visit. I need to tell you something important while I still can. She came the following weekend, brought her husband and my grandchildren. They sat in my living room while I tried to explain. Showed them the objects, told them about the being who'd been visiting for 36 years, told them about the memories he'd returned. about the impossible gift. They looked at me with pity. "Dad," Sarah said gently, "this is the dementia. You're confused. These objects are just things you collected over the years. The memories feel vivid because you're dwelling on them, not because anything supernatural happened." "I'm not confused," I insisted. "I know how it sounds, but this is real. He's real, the relationship is real, the gift is real." "Dad, there's no such thing as Bigfoot. And even if there were, he couldn't transfer memories into objects. That's not how memory works, that's not how biology works. You're experiencing false clarity. It's common with Alzheimer's. You think things are clearer than they are." I showed them the collection on my mantle, 36 years of gifts, explained the pattern, the consistency, the increasing complexity. They saw natural objects collected by a lonely old man, saw dementia creating narrative around random things, saw their father losing his grip on reality. My son-in-law, practical as always, tried a different approach. "Marcus, even if something did visit you, maybe a bear you've anthropomorphized, maybe a homeless person you've misremembered, the memory restoration you're describing isn't possible. Memory doesn't work that way. You can't extract it and put it in objects. What you're experiencing is your brain creating false memories that feel real. It's a documented symptom." "Then explain this," I said. I told them specific details from memories I'd forgotten years ago. Details they could verify. Names of people from my childhood they'd heard me mention once decades ago but that I'd forgotten. Details from their own childhoods that I'd lost but now remembered perfectly. Specific dates, specific conversations. Things that proved these weren't false memories but real ones. Restored. They couldn't explain it, but they also couldn't accept it. The cognitive dissonance was too great. Easier to believe their father's dementia was causing elaborate confabulation than to accept that Bigfoot was real and had abilities beyond human comprehension. They started making arrangements for memory care, found a facility nearby, scheduled my move for September. I didn't fight them. Understood how it looked from outside. An old man with dementia claiming Bigfoot gave him back his memories. Of course they didn't believe me. Why would they? But I know what happened. Know the memories are real. Know the gift was given. And I'm recording this testimony now in August 2023, while I still have the clarity to do so. Because even if my children don't believe me, even if the world dismisses this as the confused testimony of a dementia patient, the truth deserves to be recorded. His species has abilities we don't understand, can preserve memories externally, can transfer them, can save them against time and disease and the fragility of individual brains. This is technology or biology or something beyond my comprehension. But it's real. I experienced it, lived it, and I need that documented. 3 weeks after that first restoration, he came back. One final visit, and he brought more objects, more preserved memories. Things from throughout my life that I'd forgotten or never properly remembered. Moments of joy and pain and love and loss. He was giving me everything, making sure I had a complete record of who I was before the disease took that knowledge away. This second gift was even more comprehensive than the first. He brought objects I didn't recognize, things from my childhood that I'd lost, items from early adulthood I'd forgotten existed. Each one unlocked more memories, filled in more gaps, restored more of who I was. By the time I'd touched every object, I had a more complete memory of my life than I'd had even before the dementia started. He wasn't just restoring what I'd lost. He was preserving things I'd naturally forgotten over decades. He was making me more complete than I'd been. "Why?" I asked him again. "Why go to all this trouble for one human?" He touched his chest, then mine, then made a gesture I'd never seen before. He pressed his palms together, then opened them like a book, then pointed to his head, then to the objects, then to me. He was trying to tell me something important, and I understood. It wasn't just about gratitude anymore. It wasn't just repaying a debt. He was preserving me, creating a record, making sure that even after I was gone, after dementia erased my mind, after death took my body, there would still be a complete copy of who I was, stored in objects, preserved in his keeping, remembered. "You're making me immortal," I whispered. "In your way. In your people's way. You're making sure I'm not forgotten." He made that affirmative sound. Yes, that was exactly what he was doing. I cried again. Couldn't help it. This being, this supposedly primitive creature that science refused to acknowledge, was demonstrating a concept of memory and preservation and love that exceeded anything I'd experienced from my own species. He was creating a memorial, a preservation, a record of my existence that would outlast my failing brain. "What will you do with them?" I asked. "After I'm gone?" He made gestures, pointed to the forest, made a motion like stacking, like storing, like keeping safe. He'd preserve them, keep them with his people, maybe teach them about me, maybe show them. This was the human who helped us. This was the one who chose kindness. This is his life, preserved, honored, remembered. That was July 2023. I haven't seen him since, don't expect to. That felt like a final visit, a completion. We'd maintained relationship for 36 years, and in the end he'd given me the greatest gift imaginable. He'd made sure I wouldn't be erased, wouldn't be lost to disease, would exist in some form, in his people's keeping, long after my own mind forgot who I was. I'm in the memory care facility now. It's September. My children moved me here last week. The dementia is progressing faster. Recent events are already fuzzy, but the old memories, the ones he restored, those remain perfect, crystal clear, untouchable by disease. His gift works. Even as my brain deteriorates, those preserved memories stay sharp. I don't have long. Maybe months. Maybe weeks. Soon I won't remember recording this. Won't remember him. Won't remember the 36 years of gifts and connection and love across species. But it happened. All of it happened. And somewhere in the Olympic forest, a being I saved carries a complete record of who I was. That's the gift I never expected. Not just restored memories, but the knowledge that I mattered enough to someone that they'd preserve me, that they'd save me from being forgotten, that they'd make me immortal in the only way that really matters, through being remembered completely by someone who cared. I saved his life once, 36 years ago, and he spent those 36 years making sure my life would never be truly lost, making sure I'd be remembered, making sure the disease that steals everything wouldn't steal me. That's love, across species, across time, across every boundary that supposedly separates us, and I'm grateful I lived long enough to receive it.